Maybe some things need an audience when they stop working.
Some people call harm harmless just to feel better about themselves.
What happens when a wife makes a harmless joke about her husband's bedroom skills in front of friends? Why does he go silent, only to return days later with calm, lawful actions that flip the whole story? Can a woman who thought she controlled the narrative survive the moment consequences arrive in public? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm standing here trying to convince myself that one joke at dinner didn't actually destroy my whole marriage, but the truth is starting to choke me every time I think about it. I'm Aster, and I really thought I was being funny when I laughed about my husband's bedroom skills in front of our friends. It felt harmless in the moment, like everyone was on my side, like the room needed a spark and I was the one brave enough to give it. People laughed, I laughed, and I told myself Marc would get over it like he always did. But the way he went silent, really silent, was something I didn't expect. No arguing, no cold remarks, no dramatic scene. Just a stillness that made me feel like the whole world had shifted a few steps to the left without warning. And when he didn't speak for days, I kept telling myself he was overreacting, that he'd come around, that men with pride issues just needed time. Now I'm starting to realize maybe it wasn't the joke at all. Maybe it was everything behind it, the things I said, the hints I dropped, the attention I chased. And maybe Marc finally decided he didn't have to explain himself anymore. My name is Aster, and if you had met me a year ago, you would have thought I had everything under control. I used to think that too. Nice apartment, steady job answering calls and emails for a software company, a quiet husband who did not get into trouble, one sweet little boy. From the outside, it looked like a stable life. People at work would say I was lucky. They would say Marc was a good man, the kind women complain they can never find. I would smile and nod and pretend I agreed. Inside, I kept a long list of things he did wrong, small things at first, then bigger in my head every week. Our evenings used to feel cozy. Marc would come home, put his bag by the door, kiss Milo on the head, and ask me about my day. I liked that in the beginning, when everything was new and exciting. Over time, the question started to annoy me. I felt like he should already know how hard my day was, without me telling him. I would give short answers and wait for him to notice I was upset. When he did not notice, I would tell myself he was selfish. It was easier than thinking maybe I was the one who stopped talking. Marc has this careful way about him. He moves slowly, folds his shirts in perfect squares, lines up the shoes near the door. At first, I called it sweet. I told my friends he was thoughtful and organized. Lately, I started calling it boring in my head. While he was checking if the stove was off for the third time, I would be on my phone scrolling through messages, thinking how small my life had become. The funny thing is, he did not change. I did. But I said he was the problem because that made me feel stronger. The day everything started to crack looked normal on the surface. I was in the kitchen, pretending to clean the counter while actually reading a message from Evan on my phone. Evan is this guy from work, the kind of man who never seems tired. He always has a joke ready, always has some story about a client he saved or a project he fixed. At first, it was harmless. He asked how I was coping with the call volume. I told him my husband did not understand how stressful my job was. He sent back a little joke about how men never get it. It felt good to be understood. It felt better than coming home to a man who only asked if I remembered to defrost chicken. That afternoon, Evan had sent another message about how he was sure I was the one keeping our team from falling apart. I read it 3 times. It felt like a warm light in my hand. Marc was in the living room, lying on the couch after work. I could hear Milo pushing toy cars across the floor, making soft engine sounds. It should have been a sweet scene. Instead, I felt trapped, like someone had closed the windows on a hot day. I told myself I deserved a little praise. I told myself Evan was just a friend who saw me clearly. Marc came into the kitchen and stood by the counter. He looked at the sink, then at me. He asked if I had eaten yet. I said I was not hungry. He asked if everything was all right at work. I said it was the same boring mess. He nodded and started rinsing a plate. The way he moved was slow and calm, the way it always was. Something about that calm made me angry. I wanted him to feel the same edge I felt. I wanted him to notice the weight I carried. But he just rinsed the plate, set it upside down, and wiped a little water from the counter. On the fridge behind him, my eyes caught a new mark on the calendar. It was written in his small, neat handwriting. Downtown, 11:20. No other words, no note. I asked what it was, with that light voice I use when I am really testing someone. He said it was just an errand. I asked what kind of errand needed a time like 11:20. He said it was personal. That annoyed me more than it should have. In our house, I am the one who is allowed to keep secrets, not him. At least, that is how I used to think. I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. I told him he was getting quiet and distant lately, like a roommate instead of a husband. I said I could not remember the last time he made me feel special. I did not mention the way I shrugged off his hugs or rolled away from his touch at night. I did not mention how I told my coworkers that Marc was comfortable in the bedroom, like it was a bad thing, and how they laughed. I left all that out. It was easier to say he failed than admit I kept pushing him away. Marc looked tired. He does this thing where he presses his lips together and breathes through his nose when he is trying not to say the wrong thing. He did that now. He told me he felt like anything he said would be twisted. I said he was being dramatic. He said he did not recognize the way I talked about him anymore. I said he should try harder then. In my mind, I was defending myself. In his eyes, I must have looked like someone picking a fight for sport. I still don't know why that matters so much to him. To me, conflict is just air. To him, every word cuts. Later that evening, we were all in the living room. Milo sat on the rug with his little blocks. Marc sat in the armchair with his laptop, and I lay on the couch, scrolling. I could see the glow of a spreadsheet on his screen. Rows and columns, little coloured cells. Marc never used to care about spreadsheets at home. I asked what he was working on. He said he was just sorting some things. I said it sounded boring. He did not answer. He clicked a few times, then closed the laptop when I leaned over to look. That bothered me more than it should have. I am used to seeing his stuff, his messages, his emails. If he hides something, even a harmless file, my chest tightens. I tell myself I just want honesty. The truth is, I want control. I got up and went to the kitchen, pretending I needed water. Really, I needed a reason to check my phone again. Evan had sent a new message. He wrote that I deserved someone who admired me the way my team did. He asked if Marc ever really saw how much I carried. I read the words slowly. It felt like proof that I was right about everything. I told myself this was just emotional support. I told myself it was not cheating if it was only messages, only jokes, only attention. Meanwhile, Marc was 10 feet away, folding our son's blanket and placing it neatly on the back of the couch. When Milo got sleepy, Marc picked him up and took him to his room. I heard him read a story in a soft voice, each word careful. I used to love that gentleness. Now it made me impatient. I told myself he was soft in every part of life, including in bed, and that was why I felt unsatisfied. I never asked if he could do things differently. I only complained in my group chat and laughed with coworkers about husbands who try but do not deliver. I always made sure to add that I loved him, like that made everything okay. After Milo was asleep, Marc came back to the kitchen. I was leaning against the counter again, phone in my hand. He asked if I wanted to watch something together. I said I was too tired and needed time for myself. He nodded and reached for a mug. He filled it with water, and set it on the opposite side of the counter from mine. Separate corners, separate cups. It was a small thing, but I noticed, and I still told myself he was the one pulling away. My phone buzzed again. I tilted the screen to the side so he could not see the name. Evan had sent a half joke about how some partners do not know what they have. He added that at least my team understood my value. I felt a little rush, a sharp mix of guilt and pleasure. I told myself there was no harm if I never met him outside work, if I never crossed some invisible line. I forgot that lines move every time you step close to them. Marc's own phone lit up on the counter. For a second, I saw another calendar reminder flash. Personal, through his house. He tapped the screen and the light went off. He did not explain. He did not offer a joke. He just stood there, quiet, like he was measuring something inside his head. I wanted to ask what personal meant, but then I thought about how it would look if I made a big deal out of a simple reminder when I was the one hiding whole conversations. So I stayed silent, told myself he was being secretive, and let the blame slide back onto him. The room felt small. The fridge hummed, the overhead light flickered a little, and the space between us stretched. I opened my mouth, ready to say something sharp about how some men knew how to make their wives feel wanted and some did not. The words were already forming when my phone buzzed again on the counter. Evan's name flashed on the screen. At the exact moment Marc closed the fridge door and looked up. The next morning, Marc was already dressed when I woke up. That almost never happens. Usually I get up first, check my phone, then we move around each other in the kitchen, half awake. This time, he was standing by the counter with his travel mug, work bag at his feet, like he'd been there for a while. There was a little stack of papers beside his keys. They were lined up too neatly, edges perfect. On top, a yellow sticky note said, in his handwriting, "Bring forms." No other explanation. I asked what forms he needed. He said it was just some workplace thing. I asked why he needed to bring them downtown when he usually worked on the edge of the city. He just said he had an errand before work and checked his watch, like he didn't have time to explain basic things to me. That annoyed me. I told him he seemed very busy with personal things lately. I used that word on purpose. He knew I had seen his calendar reminders. He said he was just getting organized. I laughed and said he barely remembered to take out the trash last year, and now he had forms and errands and reminders like he was running a company. He did not rise to it. He just rinsed his mug, placed it on the far end of the counter, and said he had to go. He bent down and kissed Milo on the head, who was still half asleep at the table, then said he would be home late. To me, he only said, in this quiet voice, that he hoped my day at work would be easier. I wanted to snap back that my day never felt easy, but his did. Instead, I just muttered that it depended on who listened to me. He did not bite. He picked up his papers and his keys and left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood there staring at the sticky note. Bring forms. It made my skin crawl in this stupid way, like there was a secret in those two words that I wasn't allowed to have. At the office, everything felt brighter, louder, faster. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, people laughed too loudly at the wrong times. I have always liked that noise more than the quiet of our apartment. In the noise, I am important. People ask what I think, people notice when I enter a room. At home, I am just the one who forgot to move the clothes from the washer again. Evan waved at me from his desk when I walked in. He had this easy half smile he uses on everyone, but I still tell myself it changes a little when he looks at me. He asked if I had survived another night with Mr. Calm. I laughed and said Marc had turned into a ghost lately, that he barely spoke unless it was about a bill or Milo's school. I didn't mention that I am the one who shuts things down when I don't like where the talk is going. I didn't mention my phone under the table, the message threads I keep just for myself. Those parts never sound good when you say them out loud. We had our morning team meeting in the glass conference corner. Our manager, Cal, talked about call times and customer satisfaction and some new script we were supposed to follow. I nodded, pretended to take notes. Under the table, my phone sat on my lap screen down. Between points, Evan leaned closer and whispered that I looked tired. I said I had been up late dealing with Marc's sulking. I said he was still being weird about a few silly jokes I had made weeks ago. Evan rolled his eyes and said some men couldn't handle a woman with personality. It was such a simple line, but it slid right into this empty space inside me. I told myself he saw the real me. I didn't stop to think he had only seen the parts I chose to show him. After the meeting, we went back to our desks. Calls came in non-stop. Angry customers, confused customers, people who thought we could fix their whole lives for them. My headset rubbed the side of my head, but I didn't take it off. Leaving calls in the queue just made everything worse. In between calls, I messaged Evan on our internal chat, complaining about people, about Marc, about how no one seemed to notice how much I did. He sent reactions, little laughing faces, and wrote that if he were married to me, he would schedule weekly celebrations. It was an obvious line. I still reread it 3 times. Around noon, Cal suggested we all go to the cafe down the street to work for the afternoon. Something about a change of scenery for morale. Everyone loved that idea because it meant better coffee and less direct watching from above. We packed our laptops and walked out together, a little moving cloud of people in company hoodies. The co-working cafe had this big front window and long wooden tables, the kind of place where people pretend they are freelancers and not just hiding from their offices. Evan and I ended up at the same side of a table, shoulder to shoulder, facing the glass. From outside, we probably looked closer than we really were, but it still gave me a tiny thrill. I kept my hands on the keyboard, careful not to touch his arm. I told myself that meant I had boundaries. As we worked, we talked in low voices between calls. He asked again about Marc, if he was still acting cold. I said Marc had this new habit of writing personal on his reminders and leaving stacks of papers around like he was some big shot. I said he didn't even tell me what they were. Evan raised his eyebrows and said maybe Marc was finally realizing he needed to step up. I laughed and said Marc stepping up would be a first. I felt mean when I said it, but the way Evan laughed made the meanness feel like charm, not cruelty. At one point, I glanced over at Evan's screen. He was working, sure, but his chat window was open too. He was in a thread with my name on it. It wasn't our normal team chat. It just said A. I teased him and asked if he kept secret folders for all his teammates. He smirked and said not all of them. I pretended that did not make my chest warm. Our coworker Jenna came over with her iced drink and asked if we wanted a photo for the team chat. I love photos. They prove things. They prove I was there, that I looked good, that people chose to be around me. I leaned in, tilted my head, smiled. Evan put his arm on the back of my chair. Not quite on me, but close. Jenna took a few pictures and showed us. In one of them, we looked exactly like a couple. My body angled toward him, his face turned toward mine, our heads close over the laptop. For half a second, I wondered how Marc would feel if he saw it. Then I told myself he never checked my socials anyway. I told myself if he did, maybe finally he would see how wanted I was. Back at my own laptop, I saw a notification flash. Jenna had posted the picture in our group chat, tagging both of us, writing, "Dream Team keeping the lines alive." There were laughing emojis, fire emojis, people commenting that we made customer service look hot. I laughed along, typed more jokes. Evan reacted with a little heart. It was nothing, but it was something. Later in the afternoon, when calls slowed down, I stepped outside to answer a message from my mum. Nora wanted to know if Marc was still being moody. I said yes, of course, that he was playing the victim over nothing. I said he was acting like I had ruined his life just because I said a few honest things about our bedroom to my friends. She replied that men these days were too sensitive, that my grandfather would have laughed things off. Her words wrapped around me like a blanket. I wrote back that I knew I wasn't crazy. She sent a thumbs up and a heart. Not once did she ask how Marc felt. That suited me. When I went back inside the cafe, I saw Evan watching me. He asked if everything was okay. I said my husband and my mother were both being dramatic in different ways. He shook his head and said I deserved better support. It was such a simple statement, but I could feel it shifting something in me. Better support. Like a little stamp that said, approved, on every complaint I had. We stayed at the cafe until almost 5. When we finally packed up, Jenna said she was going to post one of the pictures on her main page and tag us all. She asked if that was okay. Everyone nodded. I nodded too, because what was I supposed to say? No, please don't share a nice photo of me where I look like the star of the group. Besides, I wanted it out there. I wanted proof that I was more than some quiet man's tired wife. On the way back to the office to drop off our badges, my phone buzzed a few times in my pocket. I ignored it, figuring it was just likes. It buzzed again in the elevator. When we stepped out, I finally checked. Jenna had posted the picture. I looked great, of course. Hair on point, smile perfect. Evan looked good too, leaning in, eyes soft. The caption said, "Office heroes who keep us sane." She tagged me, Evan, our manager, and the company. I scrolled through the comments, feeling a little rush with every compliment. Then I saw something that made my stomach twist. Someone from Marc's company had liked the photo, a name I recognized from stories he told. And under it, right at the bottom, a new comment had just popped up from that same account. It said, "Hey Marc, you've got competition," with a winking face and a tag to my husband. When I saw that comment tagging Marc, my first reaction was not fear, it was irritation. I told myself people were just being playful. I told myself it showed I was attractive, that I still had something other people wanted. In my head, it was proof that I was more than the quiet life Marc kept pulling me into. On the train home, I kept checking my phone. I watched the likes go up on that photo, watched more people react to the competition comment with laughing emojis. Someone replied that our office must be fun. Another person said I was glowing. I focused on those. I told myself Marc probably would not see it, and if he did, maybe it was good for him to feel a little pressure. When I walked into the apartment that evening, the air felt different. Not heavy yet, just tight. Marc was in the kitchen, standing by the counter, sorting through some envelopes. There was a folder on the table near him, one I hadn't seen before. It was plain, but there was a small label on the side I could barely read. It looked like utilities, but I couldn't be sure. He glanced up when I came in and said he had already given Milo dinner. His voice was polite, not warm. I brushed it off and said I was glad someone around here was useful. That was supposed to be a joke, but it landed wrong even to my own ears. He did not answer. He just picked up one envelope, looked at it, and slipped it into the folder. On the fridge, I noticed another new note on the calendar. It said simply, "Meeting, personal, at 3 p.m. on Friday." No other words. I laughed lightly and asked if he was starting some secret club. I reminded him he used to make fun of people who scheduled every part of their lives. He replied that sometimes planning was important. I said that sounded boring. He answered that boring could be safe. That word bothered me. Safe. I told him safe was just another word for dead inside. He did not rise to it. He asked instead if I remembered that we had dinner plans with our friends on Saturday. For a second, I had actually forgotten. I have this habit of living in my phone, in my own drama, and letting real plans fade. He said he already confirmed the reservation at the Riverside Bistro, the one with the big windows and long tables. I felt a quick wave of excitement at that. I like that place. It has this warm light and soft music and the kind of background noise where you can talk just loud enough to be heard. It is the perfect stage. I told him it would be good for him to see me in my element again, making people laugh. He did not smile. He just nodded and said he hoped the night would go smoothly. The rest of that evening, he was quiet but busy. While Milo watched a cartoon, Marc sat at the table with his laptop open. I walked past once and saw a spreadsheet again. Columns with dates down the side, and words I couldn't read from where I stood. When I moved closer, he closed it with one hand. I asked what he was tracking, trying to sound casual. He answered that he was keeping records so he would not forget important things. I said he was acting like an old man. He did not respond. Instead, he opened a simple notes app on his phone and typed something, then placed the phone face down. I went to the bedroom and messaged Evan. I told him we had this dinner coming up, and I was already dreading Marc's boring stories about bills. Evan wrote back that at least I would be there to keep the table alive. He said people always noticed when I entered a room. He added that if my friends were anything like me, the evening would be interesting. I smiled at that and told myself again this was just friendly support, nothing more. Saturday came faster than I expected. All morning, Marc moved through the apartment quietly. He ironed his shirt, helped Milo pick out clothes, checked something on his phone every so often. I did my makeup slowly at the bathroom mirror, watching my own face change as I added little touches. I wanted to look sharp, like the kind of woman who could joke about anything and still be adored. Around noon, I walked into the kitchen and found a single USB drive lying next to that same utilities folder. It had a date written on it in small letters. I picked it up and asked what it was. Marc said simply that it was backup. I asked backup of what? He said of things that matter. His tone was calm. Calm always feels like a slap to me. I set the USB back down harder than I needed to and told him he was being weird. He did not argue. He just placed the USB under the folder, out of sight, and asked if I was ready for the evening. By the time we reached the restaurant, the sky was dim and the lights from the buildings reflected in the river. The bistro was busy, full of couples and groups, all talking over one another in a low hum. Our table was near the window, long enough for 8 people. My friends were already there when we arrived, waving and calling my name. That felt good. They greeted me like I was the main event. Marc got a few polite nods. I told myself that difference meant something. We sat down and ordered drinks. The conversation started with safe topics, like work and traffic and school. I could feel an itch under my skin. I don't like safe topics for long. I like stories, jokes, reactions. Every time Marc answered a question, he kept it short. He said work was steady. He said Milo liked his new teacher. He said he was fine. My friends gave these small smiles, then turned back to me for the real entertainment. One of them asked how things were at my office. I laughed and said the usual chaos, but that I had a secret weapon in my coworker who kept me sane. Someone asked if this was the guy from the cafe picture. I felt a spark go through me. They had seen it. I told them yes, that Evan was funny and supportive and always ready with a joke. I added that it felt nice to be around someone who understood my brain and not just my grocery list. I did not look at Marc when I said that. I could feel his eyes on me, though, like a weight on my shoulder. The drinks kept coming. The jokes got louder. At some point, the talk shifted to relationships and keeping things exciting. One friend complained that her husband fell asleep in front of the TV every night. Another said her boyfriend thought sending one text a day counted as romance. They laughed, looking at me, waiting. I am known as the one who will say the thing other people only hint at. I took a sip of my drink and felt the warmth rush into my chest. I looked at Marc sitting there, quiet, fingers on the stem of his glass. The old part of me, the mean part that likes attention, woke up. I told myself this was my chance to remind everyone that I was still fun, still bold. I told myself Marc needed to hear some truths. I forgot for a moment that truth without care can turn into a weapon. I started with a light remark about how Marc is so calm that sometimes I have to check if he still has a pulse. The table laughed. Marc gave a small smile that did not reach his eyes. I saw that, but I kept going. I said he is great at many things, that he is patient with Milo and good with numbers. Then I paused. I could feel the whole table leaning in. This is always the dangerous place, the gap before the punchline. I said in a half-joking tone that when it came to the bedroom, Marc was steady, not wild. I said it like a playful complaint. My friends burst into laughter. Someone clapped a hand on the table. One friend joked that maybe steady was better than surprising. Another asked if I ever got bored. I smiled and rolled my eyes in this exaggerated way, like I was a comedian on stage. I said something about knowing his every move before he made it. The laughter got louder. A few heads from nearby tables turned toward us. I did not stop. I said that sometimes I wished for a little more adventure, and that if it weren't for certain distractions, I might have fallen asleep. I did not name Evan, but the idea of distractions was clear enough to feed the drama. One of my friends whistled. Another person at a nearby table lifted their phone, probably recording or taking a picture. I noticed the phone, but instead of feeling ashamed, I felt thrilled. Evidence, I thought, proof that I was bold, that I did not hide. Marc's face changed slowly. The colour drained, then returned in a tight flush on his cheeks. He did not shout. He did not slam his glass down. He just looked at me and then looked away, out the window at the dark water. Someone asked him lightly if he wanted to defend himself. That was supposed to be a friendly question, but it sounded sharp in the air. He said he did not think our private life was a group game. He spoke quietly, but I could hear every word. I laughed and said everyone shared things these days, that it was normal, that it meant there was nothing to hide. He answered that not everything needed an audience. I shrugged and said maybe some things did when they stopped working. I heard myself say that and still chose not to stop. Leah, his sister, shifted uncomfortably at the far end of the table. I had almost forgotten she was there. She said softly that maybe we should change the topic. I snapped that she did not need to protect her brother, that we were adults. I told the table Marc could handle a little joke. My arms were open, like I was presenting him as part of the bit. People laughed again, but it sounded thinner now. Marc put his napkin down very carefully. He stood up, reached into his pocket, and took out his card. He told the waiter he wanted to pay for our part of the bill. He did not look at me when he said it. The waiter nodded and walked away. The table went quiet, except for some nervous shifting and a nervous little giggle from someone who did not know what else to do. I asked Marc where he was going, trying to sound casual. He answered that he needed air. I said he was overreacting to a harmless comment. He replied that some people would always call harm harmless so they could feel better about themselves. His voice was calm, not loud. That calmness made my stomach clench in a way shouting never would have. The waiter came back, handed him the receipt. Marc signed it quickly, thanked the waiter, and then, without another word to me or anyone else, he turned and walked toward the door. As he moved away, I noticed two people at a nearby table lift their phones higher, like they wanted to catch the whole scene. The door to the bistro opened. Marc stepped out into the night and disappeared from sight. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click that felt too final. Around me, the table was silent, every eye on me, waiting to see what I would do next. The next day, I woke up with a dry mouth and a heavy head, even though I had not drunk that much. The first thing I did was grab my phone. That is always my first move, before I even sit up. For a second, I forgot about the restaurant. I just wanted to see new notifications. They were there. Dozens of them. Our friend group chat was full of messages from last night. People had sent little clips and blurry photos of the table. One of the videos had me in the center, laughing with my hands spread wide, my voice louder than everyone else. You could not hear every word, but you could hear enough. The part where I joked about knowing Marc's every move in bed played clear as day. In the corner of the frame, you could see him sitting stiff, staring at the table. I watched it twice. The first time, I tried to see it like a stranger. The second time, I watched my own face closely. I looked confident, sure of myself. That should have made me happy. Instead, something in my stomach turned. Under the clip, someone had written that they hoped Marc was not too mad, with a laughing emoji. Another friend had replied that I always kept things real. A third message just said that it got pretty rough near the end. There was no emoji after that one. That annoyed me. I told myself they were being sensitive. Jokes are jokes. People act like they want honesty, then get scared when they hear it. Marc was not in the bed beside me. His side was smooth, the blanket still tucked. I got up and walked through the apartment, bare feet on the cold floor. The guest room door was half closed. I pushed it open and saw that the bed was made there too, the blanket folded neatly at the end. A shirt of his was hanging over a chair, but that was it. No sound from anywhere. I checked the time. Almost 8. Usually by then, he was making coffee or helping Milo with cereal. The kitchen was empty. 2 mugs were on the counter. His was washed and set upside down to dry. Mine was still half full from yesterday. A ring of old coffee dried along the inside. Next to his mug lay another small sticky note. It said, in the same neat handwriting, Downtown 9:25. I stared at it. I told myself it was just some boring work thing. Still, I did not like knowing less than him. I crumpled my own mug's paper napkin and threw it harder than needed into the trash. Milo shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. He asked where his dad was. I told him his dad had left early for some errands. That was true enough. Milo nodded slowly and climbed onto the chair at the table. He did not say anything else, but he kept looking at the empty doorway, like he expected Marc to appear any second. On the way to drop Milo at school, my phone buzzed non-stop. My mother was already texting. She had seen one of the photos from the dinner, the ones without sound. She said she could tell Marc was upset. She asked what had happened. I wrote back quickly that he was sulking because I had made one tiny joke in front of everyone. I added that he was acting like I had committed some crime. She sent back that some men could not handle a woman who spoke her mind. I said I knew that. I said people kept telling me I was too much, but I wasn't going to shrink to make a man comfortable. It felt good to write that, like I was the strong one in a movie. My mother replied that she was proud of me for not letting him control me. Not once did she ask what I had said. She only asked how long he planned to punish me with silence. After I left Milo at school, I stopped at the small playground across the street for a minute. I told myself I just needed air. Really, I needed time before going home to the quiet apartment. I sat on a bench and scrolled through my feed. Someone had posted a vague status about knowing people who humiliate their partners and then act like victims. There was no name in it, but my chest tightened anyway. I checked the comments to see if anyone tagged me. No one did. I still felt watched, like the entire city had seen that clip. Leah called while I was there. I considered not answering, but curiosity won. I picked up and listened. She did not yell. She rarely yells. That almost makes it worse. She asked if I understood how bad last night had been for her brother. I said he was the one who walked out and made it dramatic. She said walking away was the least dramatic thing he could have done. I told her I was tired of everyone babying him. I said he was acting like a victim when all I did was tell the truth. She went quiet for a second and then said she did not recognize me anymore. That got under my skin. I told her she had always judged me. I reminded her I was the one who kept Marc's life running, who handled school forms and clothes and birthday parties. She said Marc had been the one filling out most of the forms lately, actually. She mentioned that he had called her after leaving the restaurant, asking if Milo could spend a weekend at their mother's soon. She said his voice had sounded very calm and very tired. That detail bothered me more than anything. Calm and tired. I told her he was just trying to win sympathy. I said he knew exactly how to play the quiet good guy act so everyone would defend him. She replied in this low voice that if he were trying to play a part, he would shout, not sit in silence. I hung up before she could make me feel worse. When I got home, I went straight to the kitchen. The folder from the night before, the one I thought said utilities, was still on the table. Next to it now was another one, slightly bigger, labeled household. I opened it without asking. Inside were neatly stacked papers, bills, pay stubs, bank printouts. There were little notes in the margins, dates circled, amounts underlined. My stomach gave a small jolt. I heard a soft click behind me. Marc stood in the doorway. He did not rush forward to snatch the folder away. He just looked at me, then at the papers in my hand. He said quietly that he had started organizing things so nothing would be a surprise later. I asked what he meant by later. He said he wanted to make sure Milo would be okay no matter what happened. That word, no matter what, landed like a stone in my chest. I told him he was talking like we were already finished, like one dinner could break everything. He replied that it was not one dinner. He said it had been many moments, building on each other. I said he was stacking up small issues to make a big story where I was the villain. He said he did not need to make anything up, he just needed to remember clearly. He walked past me then and closed the folder gently. He slid it into the corner of the table. I saw his phone light up in his pocket at the same time. For a moment, I thought I heard a soft beep, like a recording app stopping or starting. I could not be sure. Paranoia can sound like anything. In the afternoon, I had to go to the supermarket. Life still needed food, even if everything else was a mess. I pushed the cart down the aisles, throwing in things without thinking. My face felt hot every time I passed someone, like they somehow knew what I had said the night before. 2 women from the neighborhood stood near the cereal, talking in low voices. One of them glanced at me and quickly looked away. My mind decided they were talking about me, even though they probably were not. As I turned into the dairy aisle, I almost walked straight into Helen, Marc's mother. She stood there with a basket on her arm, staring at the rows of cheese like she had never seen them before. When she saw me, her back went straight. She nodded, polite but cold. I tried to act normal. I asked how she was, said it had been a busy week, said we should have coffee soon. She answered that she had seen Marc that morning. She said he had brought over some documents to keep in her safe. She did not say what kind. She added that he had needed someone to talk to. Her eyes did not leave my face as she said that part. I told her he was turning a small joke into a big drama. I said he was making me look like a monster to everyone. I reminded her that I had been there for him all these years, through his job changes and family problems. I said he was paying me back with silence and little secret notes. She replied that what hurt her most was not the joke itself, but the way I smiled after, like his pain was a show. She said she loved me because he loved me, but that she would stand by him if he decided he had had enough. Those words shook me. For a second, it felt like the floor under the aisle tilted. I wanted to shout that she was being unfair, that she did not know the full story. Instead, I just said that I did not deserve to be frozen out of my own marriage. She said I should think about whether I had frozen him out first. As we stood there, someone walked past the end of the aisle. It was Marc. He did not see us at first. He had a basket too, and in his hand was a receipt. He held his phone over it, snapping a photo before sliding both into his pocket. His face looked tired but focused, almost blank. When he finally noticed us, he gave his mother a small nod and gave me the smallest possible greeting you could still call polite. I stepped toward him, ready to start a fight right there between the yogurt and the juice. I wanted to ask why he needed photos of receipts, why he needed 2 folders, why he needed backup USB drives. I wanted to tell the whole aisle that he was the one turning our life into a case file. Before I could speak, Milo's teacher called. She said Milo had been quieter than usual today and had asked her if his parents were angry. She wanted to know if everything was okay at home. I heard my own voice tell her that everything was fine, that Milo was just tired. When I hung up, Marc was watching me again, his expression unreadable. That evening, after Milo's bath, we all ended up in the living room again. Milo sat on the floor with his toys. Marc sat in the armchair with a small notebook in his hand, not the laptop this time. I sat on the couch, flipping through channels without seeing anything. The air between us felt thick. Milo suddenly looked up at me, then at Marc. In his small voice, he asked why Daddy slept in the other room now. He asked if it was because of something he had done. My throat closed. I said quickly that Daddy was just tired and needed space, that it had nothing to do with him. My words sounded thin even to me. Marc put down the notebook. For a moment, I thought he was going to finally speak to me properly, really talk it all out. Instead, he stood, walked over to Milo, and knelt beside him. He told him that none of it was his fault, that grown-ups sometimes had problems they needed to fix. He chose every word carefully and did not look at me once. When he stood up again, he picked up his notebook and his phone. He said quietly that he had to step out for a bit. I asked where he was going. He replied that he had another personal meeting. Then he walked to the door and pulled it closed behind him, leaving me alone in the room with a silent TV, a confused child, and the sound of my own breathing growing louder in my ears. By the time Marc came back that night, the apartment felt like someone had taken all the air out of it and left only noise inside my head. I kept pacing from the kitchen to the living room, checking the clock, checking my phone, opening the guest room door, and staring at the empty bed. Milo had finally fallen asleep after asking again if his dad was mad. I had given him the same line about grown-up problems, but even I was tired of hearing myself say it. Marc walked in around 9. He moved quietly, set his keys in their usual spot, took off his shoes. He did not come looking for me. I found him in the guest room, standing by the desk he had moved in there. His laptop was open. A list of folders glowed on the screen. Each had a simple name: Archive A, Archive B, Household, Photos. There was a single USB drive on the desk next to it, with yesterday's date written on the side in tiny letters. I asked where he had been. He said he had met someone to discuss a few things. He did not say who. I asked if it was work. He said it was personal. I said I was tired of that word. He said I would understand soon enough. That calm tone again, like he was talking to a client and not to his wife. It made me want to scream. I told him he could not just live in the guest room and pretend everything was normal. I said he was hurting Milo, that his silent treatment was cruel. He answered that he spoke to Milo and always would, but he was careful with what he gave to me now. He said he had finally understood that not everything I turned into a joke was harmless. I told him he was acting like one dinner had erased our whole marriage. He said quietly that our marriage had been peeling for a long time and that the dinner had only ripped off the last layer. He turned back to the laptop. I noticed a small cloud icon in the corner of the screen flash and a message pop up that said, "File uploaded successfully." I did not see which file. I asked if he was backing things up. He said he was making copies because he did not want to depend on my version of events later. I said he was becoming paranoid. He did not look at me when he said that he hoped so. That answer stung in a way I did not want to admit. I walked out and slammed the guest room door harder than needed. The sound made Milo stir in his room. I forced my breathing to slow, told myself I would not be the one who begged first. I messaged my mother instead. I told Nora that Marc was slipping into some strange quiet world and dragging our child with him. I said he had started keeping folders and backups, like I was some criminal he needed to protect himself from. She said he was being dramatic and controlling. She reminded me that his father had always been rigid, and that men often repeated their fathers. She said I needed to show Marc that I would not be bullied by silence and paperwork. Her words lit a small fire in my chest. I told her I was tired of being the only one who tried. She suggested I come over the next day and bring Milo for lunch, said we could talk properly. I said that sounded good. I did not ask Marc if he had plans. At that point, I did not feel like his plans were my business anymore. The next day, the air already felt heavy when I woke up. Marc was at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and his notebook. He told me he would take Milo to school himself that morning. He said it would give them time together. I asked if he was trying to cut me out already. He replied that he was trying to make sure his son remembered his father as present, not just as a shadow in the hallway. I told him he was talking like a man who planned to leave. He said nothing at first, just turned the page in his notebook. I saw that he had lines written with dates on them and short notes next to each date. Some were simple, like dinner with friends. Some had more words, like jokes about bedroom in front of group, public. I felt my cheeks go hot. I told him he had no right to write our private life down like some case file. He said I had already turned our private life into content and that he was just making sure his memory stayed clear when everyone else began rewriting the story. I said he was accusing me of things I had not done. He said I knew better than anyone what I had done and what I had let myself flirt with. That line hit too close to Evan, so I snapped back that he was making me into a villain to make himself feel strong. He did not argue. He closed the notebook, kissed Milo on the head, and left with him, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the faint smell of printer toner drifting in from the guest room. At my mother's place later, everything felt softer on the surface. Nora's living room always looks like a magazine page. Cushions lined up, candles on the shelf, family photos on the wall. She made coffee, set out cookies, listened to me talk. I told her about the restaurant, about the folders, about the notebook with dates. I left out the part where people online had started to comment that the jokes sounded cruel. I left out the way my stomach had twisted watching my own face on that video. She told me Marc was punishing me instead of talking like an adult. She said some men used silence as control, the same way others use shouting. She said I should not let him make me feel guilty for being open with my friends. She reminded me that I had always been the lively one, the entertainer, the spark. She said she did not want to see me shrivel into some quiet little housewife because he could not handle my light. Those words felt like praise and poison at the same time. I said maybe I had gone a bit too far at dinner, but that I was only speaking truth, and that truth was better than lies. She said that if he could not handle jokes, that was on him. She added that I should not be afraid of starting over if I needed to. That last part made something cold rub against my ribs, but I pushed it down. I told myself she was just being supportive. On my way back home, Evan messaged. He asked if I was all right, because I had sounded off in our earlier chats. I told him Marc was still playing injured saint, and that he had started keeping some kind of record of my words. Evan replied that it sounded like Marc had control issues. He said I deserved someone who did not make me feel like I was on trial every day. He wrote that if I needed a break, he was free for coffee. I hesitated for a moment, then told him I could meet for a short while before going home. I justified it as self-care. My husband had made me feel like dirt. My coworker wanted to make me feel seen. It sounded simple in my head. We met at a small co-working lounge near the office. It was quieter than the cafe, with soft music and plants on tables. Evan greeted me with that easy half smile and asked how bad things had gotten. I told him about the guest room, about the folders, about the notebook. I said Marc was planning something, that I could feel it, but he would not tell me what. Evan shook his head and said it was not healthy to share a home with someone who saw you as a problem to solve. We sat on a couch in the corner. I talked more than I meant to. I told him how exhausted I was, how I always had to be the one who brought the fun, even when I was dying inside. I said I had tried to shake Marc awake with that joke, to get some reaction out of him, any reaction. Evan said he understood, that no woman wanted to feel invisible in her own bed, in her own life. He reached for my hand when I started to tear up. It was a small thing, our fingers touching, but it felt huge in that moment. I let his hand stay on mine. I told myself it was comfort, not cheating, not really. The line slid further under my feet. Before we left, he leaned in and brushed his lips against my cheek for a second longer than normal. My heart jumped, and I did not pull away. I also did not let him kiss me properly. In my head, that meant I still had control. It meant I could say I had not crossed the line, not fully. When I got home, Marc was at the table again. The laptop was closed this time, but the printer next to it hummed softly. A blank page sat in the tray, as if something had printed and then been removed. I asked where he and Milo had been. He said they had visited his mother. He added that he had dropped off a few documents for safekeeping. He said that later he would need to talk to me about arrangements. I felt my throat tighten. I asked what kind of arrangements. He said he wanted to discuss schedules, money, and what would be best for Milo if things changed. He did not say the word divorce, but it hung in the air like a bad smell. I laughed in this high, false way and said he was making a child custody drama out of one joke. He said it was not about one joke, and he was tired of hearing me say that. He added that he had tried to talk for years, and that I had always turned his feelings into punchlines. I told him he was rewriting history. I said he had always been the safe, boring one, and I had been the one who kept our life afloat. I reminded him of all the birthdays I had planned, the parties I had hosted, the way our friends always gravitated to our place because of me. He said quietly that our friends now sent him messages asking if he was okay, because they had seen enough. That stung. I asked if he had been gossiping about me behind my back. He replied that he had simply answered when people asked if he felt all right. He said he had not told them anything I had not already shown them at dinners and in videos. He looked tired, old even, as he said it. Later that evening, after we put Milo to bed, he asked if I would come downstairs with him for a moment. He said he wanted to talk without Milo hearing. We walked down to the parking garage under our building. The light was harsh and cold down there, bouncing off the cars and pillars. For a second, I almost felt like I was in one of those crime shows I watch, where everything bad happens in concrete spaces. I thought about that and nearly laughed at my own drama. Marc leaned against the car and told me he was done begging me to respect him in private and done letting me tear him apart in public. He said he would not fight with me anymore in front of our son, or our families, or our friends. He said he was going to protect himself and protect Milo the right way now. I asked what right way meant. He said it meant he had spoken to people who knew how to do things properly. He said he had copies, dates, notes, and a clear head. I accused him of planning to blindside me. I said only cowards hid behind rules and papers. He answered that rules and papers were the only things that did not bend under my stories. He said he had tried for years with feelings and words, and I had laughed. Now he would try something else. I stepped closer and told him he owed me a chance to fix this without turning our life into a file box. I said he had misunderstood everything, that I never meant to hurt him, that it was just my way of coping. He said maybe I believed that, but that intent did not erase impact. He added that for once, he was choosing impact over excuses. He opened the car door, then paused and looked at me. His face was calm, almost empty. He said he would handle it properly. The morning it all landed, the sky looked too bright, like it was trying too hard. I woke up with this tight feeling in my chest, like my body knew something my brain didn't. Marc had already left. His side of the bed was smooth again. In the kitchen, his mug was washed and upside down. Mine still had yesterday's lipstick on the rim. On the fridge, there was a new reminder written in his small handwriting. Downtown, 11:20. That same exact time again. Not errands, not some random thing. It was like that time followed him around now. Something in me snapped. I decided I was done waiting for him to talk. If he wanted to play secret games with calendars and folders, fine, but I wasn't going to be kept in the dark. I told myself a strong woman walks into the problem and forces it to the table. Milo was already at school. I got dressed quickly, not my usual careful routine, just jeans and a decent top. I still put on mascara though. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to look steady, like I wasn't afraid. I checked Marc's work email address in my phone for the office tower address. I knew where his company was, downtown, near the big glass buildings and the tram lines. I told myself I would surprise him, make him talk to me in a place where he couldn't walk away without looking bad. On the tram ride into the city, my thoughts spun. I rehearsed speeches in my head. I'd tell him he was hurting our son. I'd tell him that we could fix things if he would just stop acting like a judge and talk to me like a husband. I pictured him softening, finally dropping this cold act, maybe even apologizing for making such a big deal out of just jokes. I was already writing the scene where I was the reasonable one and he realized it. When I got off the tram, the air downtown was sharp and busy. People streamed in and out of glass doors, with badges on their chests and coffee in their hands. Marc's building stood in the middle of it all windows, all reflections. I could see my own face for a second in the glass doors as I walked up, eyes a little too wide, mouth pressed tight. The lobby was tall and echoing, all stone and metal and plants in big pots. A security desk sat in the center. People moved around me in neat lines, scanning badges, heading to elevators. I felt out of place without a lanyard or a laptop bag. Still, I lifted my chin. I walked up to the desk, gave Marc's full name, and said I was his wife. The man behind the desk glanced at his screen for a second. Something in his expression shifted, just slightly. He said I should wait off to the side for a moment. I stepped aside, near a big column, my heart thumping. I imagined Marc getting a call upstairs, being told I was in the lobby. I imagined him sighing, annoyed but resigned, then coming down. We'd talk, people would see us, he'd have to act civil. In my head, I still had control. A woman in a grey blazer stood nearby, talking quietly on her phone. A courier pushed a trolley with boxes past me. Somewhere behind me, a printer whirred in an office. Normal sounds. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Evan asking how I was holding up. I didn't answer. For once, his attention felt far away. I checked the big digital clock on the wall. 11:18, 2 minutes until whatever downtown 11:20 really meant. I crossed my arms and watched the elevator doors, waiting for Marc's familiar shape. Instead, a man I didn't recognize walked toward me from the seating area. He wore a simple shirt and carried a large envelope in one hand and a clipboard in the other. He looked normal, like someone you'd ignore on the street. He stopped a few feet from me and said my full name. My stomach dropped. I said yes, that was me. He looked at the clipboard, then back at me. His voice was calm, almost bored. He said he had some documents for me, that I needed to receive them. He asked me to confirm my address. It was our apartment. My throat went dry. For a second, I didn't understand. Then all the movies I had ever watched lined up in my head at once. I asked him what this was. He didn't explain. He simply held out the envelope and said, "You've been served." The words hit me like a slap. I actually laughed, a small, sharp sound because it sounded ridiculous out loud, like something from TV. I said this had to be a mistake, that my husband worked in the building, that he was probably the one they meant. The man didn't argue. He just waited, arm still out, envelope still hanging between us. People were walking around us, but a few had started to slow down, eyes flicking our way. I took the envelope because I didn't know what else to do. The paper felt heavier than it looked. My fingers shook as I opened the top. The first page had an official seal at the top and words in thick, dark letters. Petition for dissolution of marriage. For a second, the letters blurred. My brain tried to swap them for something else. Notice of mediation, maybe, or some kind of counseling program, but they stayed what they were. Petition, dissolution, marriage. Under that, our full names, our address, the date of our wedding. It was us. It was real. Behind that page, there were more. I saw the words temporary orders near the top of one. My eyes jumped down without fully reading, catching pieces. Temporary financial arrangements. temporary residential schedule. A line about the primary home staying with the parent who could provide emotional stability. Another line about non-disparagement in front of the minor child. My chest squeezed. There was also a list of attachments, screenshots, bank records, copies of messages, transcripts of audio clips from public settings. One line mentioned video from a riverside restaurant on a specific date. The date of the dinner. I saw the phrase public ridicule regarding intimate matters and felt my face burn. I looked up in reflex, like I needed air. And that's when I saw him. Marc was standing on the far side of the lobby near the elevators. He wasn't in work clothes exactly. He wore a plain shirt and slacks, no tie. He had his work badge on a clip, but it hung against his chest like it belonged to someone else. His hands were at his sides, empty. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't scowling. He was just watching, eyes steady, as the envelope sagged in my hands. For a second, everything else in the lobby went quiet. I forgot the security desk, the clock, the people. It was just me, a stack of papers, and the man I had been mocking for not being wild enough in bed, who had now quietly asked a court to end our marriage. I took a step toward him, the papers crinkling under my fingers. I called his name. It came out too loud, echoing back from the high ceiling. A few heads turned. The man who had served me stepped back, already done with his part. I told Marc this was insane, that he couldn't be serious. I said we had a child. I said he was blowing one stupid moment out of proportion. My voice shook, but I tried to keep that old edge in it, the one that always made people laugh before. No one was laughing now. Marc didn't move at first. Then he lifted his hand in a small, calm gesture. Not a wave, not a goodbye, just a small acknowledgement, like he was confirming that yes, he saw me. Yes, he knew exactly what was happening. He said, in a voice loud enough for me to hear across the lobby, that all the information was in the documents. He said there were temporary orders in place starting today to make sure Milo was safe and supported. He said he had requested that we both keep our fights away from our son and stop using him as an audience. He added that any further communication should go through the proper channels now. Proper channels, papers, orders, words I had always used to joke about other people's dramas were now wrapped around my own name. I tried to step closer again, the envelope clutched against my chest. I told him he couldn't just end things because he was embarrassed. I said he should at least try counseling, try talking, try anything besides this. My words came too fast, tripping over each other. Marc looked at me, really looked, like he was memorizing the scene. There was sadness in his face, and something else behind it. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. He said quietly that he had been trying for years, and that I had laughed every time. He said this was him not laughing anymore. One of his coworkers walked by, recognized him, then saw me and the envelope, and quickly looked away. At the security desk, the guard pretended not to listen. In the reflection of the glass, I could see myself, mouth open, eyes wide, clutching legal papers like a shield that didn't work. A light above the elevator dinged. One of the doors slid open with a soft chime. Marc turned toward it. For one moment, I thought he might come over instead, might tear up the papers, might take it all back if I just said the right combination of words. I opened my mouth to speak again. He stepped into the elevator. I rushed forward, the envelope slipping in my sweaty hands. The man who had served me didn't touch me, but he moved just enough into my path that I had to shift around him, losing a second. It was nothing, but it was everything. When I got past him, Marc was already inside, his back to the mirrored wall, one hand on the rail, eyes on me. Our eyes met through the narrowing space. I saw no anger there now, just a tired kind of final decision. My heart hammered against my ribs. I told myself I still had time, that I could still fix this, that he couldn't really mean it. The doors slid toward each other, smooth and slow, cutting his face in half, then in quarters, then into a thin line. They closed with a soft click before I could say another word.